Welcome back to Cities Skylines 2 Overexplained. Today we are talking about public transport, a very highly requested topic on this channel. My aim for today at the very least is to show off setting up some bus routes, and we'll talk through the UI and how to manage everything properly too. Before we get to playing though, if you're a new player or if you're American, let me explain why public transport is so important. It moves people much more efficiently than personal cars do. It improves happiness and land value of the surrounding area as well. It also reduces traffic, so your service vehicles can work more efficiently, and it can even cover its own costs and even turn a profit thanks to the ticket prices. Now, some things to consider before we start slapping down public transport willy-nilly. The number of transport connections an area has should be proportional to the area's population density, particularly if you want it to actually be cost effective. Keep in mind the routes that people actually want to take as well. Most people have to commute to work and back every day, and your routes should reflect that. And don't create traffic problems when you're trying to fix them. Buses and trams often use public roads, so keep track of their routes and give them shortcuts so they can bypass busy traffic areas. With all that said, let's hit play and put some of these tips into action. And we're back in our tutorial town here. For anyone new to this series, this is a beginner-friendly playthrough where, as we progress, I'm stopping to explain, and in some cases over-explain, all the mechanics and systems of the game. For returning viewers, you might have noticed a little bit has changed here. My chimp of an audio technician forgot to record his own voice, and I wanted to go back, but I'd already overwritten the save, so this is as far back as I could go. So the only important things you've missed is, I built a new neighbourhood with some low rent housing. We unlocked a medium density signature building, which can hold 180 households. I built some more sexy pedestrian bridges. And finally, we hit Milestone 5, so let's take a look at what we've unlocked there. First thing is the mixed housing. This is essentially like having a shop on the ground floor and then apartments above it, which is really cool. They're quite hard to use though, because this can cause some problems. Basically, it satisfies both commercial and medium density demand, and it will zone in if there's demand for either one of those. This means you could have loads of mixed housing where all the shops are occupied but none of the residential, and this really messes with your demand. If there's loads of unoccupied medium density around, you won't get any more medium demand showing up in the bottom left here. So they can be really cool, but use them sparingly and keep an eye on if they're actually being occupied. Milestone 5 also unlocks communication, which your citizens will demand immediately. This covers both legacy communication like post offices, and also things like internet, telephone towers and data centers as well. Finally, we unlock some district policies, which I can show off here. If we go into the district and then click on the policies up here, and we open this drop down, there's some policies we can enact in this area. So just to show this off, I'm going to try out the roadside parking fee. This means that we can charge anyone in this district up to 50 quid just for parking here. And in my experience, this doesn't seem to deter people from parking on the road. So it's basically free money. Now onto public transport, probably the reason why you clicked on this video. When we hit Milestone 4, we unlocked the transportation window down here, which you can click on this bus and open up. Now by default, you get access to both buses and taxis right off the bat when you unlock it. Now let's take a second to talk about taxis, because they're quite often overlooked in this game. By default, you get access to two types of taxi depot, the small and the normal. They're functionally both the same, except they've got varying amounts of upkeep and vehicles. As I'm sure you can imagine, taxis are in the game to pick people up on demand and drop them off at specific locations. And they're the only one that you can actually see in the game right off the bat. You can see this huge conga line of taxis coming in and out of our city. Bear in mind that these are not our taxis. This is from the outside of the map. These guys are specifically here just to drop people off at their new house and then leave again. So that means we can't control them, we can't change their taxi fare, and we definitely won't be making any money off them just yet. However, if we did want to control it and make money off them, we do need to put down a taxi depot. So just to make an example, I'm going to put down the small taxi depot here. Maybe we'll choose somewhere nice and central. Oh, that looks like a nice spot. Although, bear in mind, these obviously do cause traffic as well, so we want to pick somewhere a little bit out the way. So we plonk that down. The locals are quite unhappy because it does produce noise pollution. But you'll notice this has now unlocked the different types of taxi stands as well. Now there are different themes for it as well. We could put down North American ones. I'll stick with European just to fit the map. So now we've got a taxi depot. You'll notice we have taxis actually in here ready to go. This guy's had a bit of a terrible accident here. What on earth? Okay. This must be the off-ramp to get them going nice and quickly. So now we have a taxi depot here, and we can upgrade this as well. It's got varying amounts of upgrades. We'll come back to that in a second. But putting down a taxi depot will now give us our own fleet of taxis. You can see here, we can now adjust their budget and adjust their fares as well. So you can adjust your city's taxi fares by clicking on the demand and then going to city policies here. And there we go, taxi base fare. You can see I've already set it at 50. You can set it at whatever you like. Again, I'll come back and tell you some more info on this later on. But this is how you adjust the fare. And this now means that we'll make money off the trips that they do within our city as well. However, we still won't be able to make any money off the guys coming outside of the map here into the city. There's not much you can do about these guys. The best way to reduce the amount of taxis coming in and out is give them other routes like public transport. Say, you know, come into the city via train, for example. What the game doesn't explain, though, is that for these guys to actually work properly and to go out and pick people up, you need to put down these taxi stands here, which has always puzzled me a little bit. I don't think I've ever got a taxi from a taxi stand in real life. You know, any reasonable taxi comes and picks you up from wherever you want to, but in the game, this is how you have to do it. Either via a taxi stand, or you can upgrade your taxi depot to have the dispatch center as well. And that means, like the icon indicates, you've got a call center inside this building here who's taking calls and saying taxis go to here, pick them up, and then take them over here, etc. Now, in the grand scheme of things, taxis aren't the most useful public transport in the game. They fill quite a niche role because by nature, the routes that they usually take people to and from are not routes that are usually well served by other types of public transport. One of their main uses I've found for them is actually for like tourists. When you get to that point in the game, you know, once you've built a lovely beautiful city and you've got tourist attractions, you'll have tourists who want to go to these niche areas and they don't have their own personal car in the city and therefore they have to take a taxi. So that's one use of them. Another use as well is sometimes your roles in the city are filled by workers from off the map as well. So that's actually another use for the taxis, is fetching workers from outside the city and taking them to work. Now, taxis actually tend to have the lowest usage of all public transport. Obviously, asterisk there, you might set up a rubbish transport line that no one uses, but they're down the lower end of the usage rate and also down the lower end of the income rate as well, because they've only got 4 seats in the taxi. So, you know, that kind of bottlenecks how much money you can make off people, because you're not doing too many taxi fares at once compared to, say, putting 800 people on a train. You can see how you'd make more money off the train there. Another thing to note as well is, given that these are cars here, these will contribute to congestion in your city. Now, I don't know the exact science behind it, but I think that the traffic benefit these guys offer by, you know, being a public transport service is essentially negated by the fact that they are just another personal vehicle that is coloured yellow instead. So again, not something you want to lean on too heavily if you're trying to cut down on traffic in your city. I usually just place 1 or 2 of these taxi depots, usually a bit later in the game as well, and I'll usually place them either around a tourist heavy area, you know, if you've got lots of monuments and tourist area stuff, or I'll place it right next to a already existing public transport hub like a train station to help people do the last leg of their journey. If they are tourists, for example, you know, they can get the train into your city, and rather than walking or getting the bus, they can get the taxi to wherever they want to go and then a taxi home again. Another thing to note as well is when you do unlock water, one of these, the harbour, has an upgrade in it for a inbuilt taxi station, but to build that upgrade you have to actually have placed a taxi depot beforehand. And that's it. Those are taxis. If you'd imagine a public transport hierarchy, they're at one end of the hierarchy because because they have the lowest usage and cover some of the most niche routes, but they don't handle a very high volume of people. Next, let's talk about buses. They're probably the most commonly used form of public transport in the early game. Now, I've already had a little play around with this here, but by default, you just have access to the bus depot. And once you place that down, you unlock these other guys here as well. Now, the bus depot isn't a huge building, but I happen to know that it comes with its own suite of upgrades, which are almost essential. So you want to make sure you're placing it down somewhere that has lots of breathing room. I've been eyeing up this spot here because it's got a good road access here, but it's slightly out of the way, and it's got a bit of breathing room here. So I'm just going to go ahead and plonk this one down there. Now that we've placed down the bus depot, we will then get access to all of these guys here. So we get a variety of different bus stations here. These are like public transport hubs that can handle lots of capacity. We then also get bus stops and bus signs here. Now these are things you actually have to place down in the map. You can see they snap to either side of the road. And this gives us somewhere to tell our bus route, stop here and collect the people or drop them off. Now the main difference here between the sign and the shelter, you can see one is 8 times more expensive, the shelter is, but you get 4 times as much comfort as well. Now we haven't touched on comfort yet, but having higher comfort for your bus route makes the route more attractive and therefore will increase its usage because people will want to use it. The way I tend to use these two, I'll use the signs for lesser populated areas like this little neighborhood here, and then I'll use the shelter for the more densely populated areas. You basically want to keep it proportional with the usage you expect in that area. Now we also get access to these lovely salmon coloured roads here. These are public transport lanes. Now these are another type of road that you can draw and place down just like everything else, or you can hit the replace tool and actually place them inside of your own roads here. Can you see it's now we've got a salmon coloured road, and these roads here, the salmon area, will then prioritise public transport. So that does include buses obviously, but will also include taxis as well. And I think even service vehicles might get priority on these as well. So like your ambulances and your police cars and your garbage trucks. And these are really useful if you know that there's going to be a lot of traffic on this road, including buses, and you want to make sure that your buses can actually get through and don't spend all day in traffic. Now, when it comes to designing your bus routes, it's very tempting to just create one giant orbital bus route here, a big circular route that hits all of your city. The problem here is that can really screw with your travel times and basically make your bus route redundant unless you're going from specific places. Now let's imagine our city is a giant circle labelled A through to Z. If you were to do a big circular route going clockwise, that would be perfect if you're going from say A to B. You know, it's just down the road, it wouldn't take you very long. However, if you wanted to go from A to Z, to get there you'd have to go the entire way around the city back to Z again. This is particularly common for Sims who want to do a return trip. So say they want to go to work and back, one leg of their journey might be really quick and efficient, but then to get home again over here at Z, the return leg is going to be equally slow and inefficient getting all the way back round. Now the smart solution to this is to basically, rather than having a circular route, create bi-directional routes. So rather than going all the way around, you want to go there and back, there and back, there and back. This would then also allow us to scale our network quite easily, because then you build another route going this way to that way, this way to that way, and you have them interchange around here. So, you know, if someone was over here, they come along this road, hop off the bus, and then go back up this way. If you're lucky enough to live in a city with a good bus service, you've likely done this exact thing many, many times. Now, keep in mind that having a good bus service will still contribute to congestion. However, if people are using that instead of their personal cars, this will cause a net reduction in traffic, even though there are still buses on the road. Also, keep in mind as well that buses will have to pull in and stop and pick people up. And this obviously causes traffic as well. You'll notice when you put down a bus stop, it will actually remove the parking on the side of the road and turn it into a big bus lay-by to give them somewhere to pull in and queue up. However, something to note is this only works on roads with a little bit of space already. So this road, for example, this parking lane here will be turned into the bus lay-by. However, if you do it on an alley like this or a gravel road, there's no space to actually add the bus lane. So the buses will essentially stop in the middle of the road and cause a backup here. So my advice, don't put bus stops on narrow roads unless you've got no other choice. You could even come in and upgrade it to a 2-lane road with a pedestrian path on either side and use that for your bus lane. Now let's actually show this off, shall we? What I'm thinking, once again, we want to connect our jobs to our residential. So I might take a long route coming up north. Maybe we'll circle around the industrial and then come back down. So because we've got lots of population density around here, I might use a bus stop shelter. And one thing to keep in mind as well is you need to note not only the side of the road that people drive on, but then where people are going to be pulling in as well. So I know that I'm in left-handed traffic because that's just how my brain's wired up. So I think we'll put one over here. There we go, you see everyone's happy about that. Now we get an actual bus stop shelter here. I haven't got the anti-homeless architecture here like they do in real life. I think we'll grab another one a bit further up. Like there. And maybe one outside the school, that feels like it makes sense. Then I'm going to switch to the bus stop signs because we don't need to worry about the luxury of the industrial estate over here. And maybe we'll grab one over here so it lines up with the pedestrian path. And then I think we'll loop into the industrial estate. Maybe have one more in here somewhere like that. Going to come in, take a left and another left. And then maybe we'll add another one there. And you want to keep in mind how he's actually going to transport as well. So he's going to come along here, round the roundabout. And then maybe we'll add another one over here. And then final one in front of our park, just there. Lovely, that should be a good place to start. Now that you've got your bus stops down, we can now select the bus line tool. Now this works similarly to drawing other zones in the city. You're essentially just connecting nodes. So we're going to start off here. This will start a new bus route, and you can see now attached to our cursor, we've got a long spindly line here. You can see the arrows travelling along it, that's showing which way the traffic's going. And what took me far too long to realise, but you don't have to click on the bus stops. You can actually click wherever you want, and this is not a bus stop per se, but this is telling the bus the exact route you want him to go. So if he's going a weird route and taking a way that you don't like, you can actually click in and tell him, no, go this way. Anyway, I'm just going to come up north. You see it's following our cursor, and we'll stop here and go across the roundabout and do another stop next to the school. Actually, thinking about it, I've done this the wrong way around. We should be going around this way. And we'll put them on the other side of the road. So he comes up and takes a left. That means he's not cutting across traffic at this roundabout here. We'll chuck a bus stop down here. Maybe even a little pedestrian path to make it a bit more accessible. I'm seeing an excellent target here. Perfect. Where was I? Bus stops. He's going to take a right here. This is going to have to cut across traffic, which is going to be a bit messy. We'll put one in here. And then he comes along here. Takes a right. And we'll do one more just here. Lovely. And you'll notice here the car's just disappeared here. And this is what I mean about the bus lane here. It's just space for the bus to pull into. And he's going to come back to the roundabout and take a left and go back down the hill here. Perfect. Starting here. Grab that one. And then the school. And then this is what I mean here. He's not going to have to cut across the traffic here. He's just hugging it round to the left. We'll go through the huge car pile-up. I'll fix this later. He's still going to have to cut across a lane there. Grab that one. And all the way back round to this one. And then back down the hill here. Now when you get back to where you started, you'll just be able to click in here. See, he's going to go round the roundabout and back up to our first bus shelter here. There you go, that noise means we've completed our route. And now you can see this line is now permanent, showing where the bus is going. Now that we've finished that, we can come into this little map icon here with the little bus routes and bring up the transportation overview. And you can see we've now got our bus line here being shown. We can click into here and change the name. Let's call this residential-industrial, because that's what he's doing. And you can see this is covering a length of 3.3 kilometers here with 8 total stops. At the moment it's got 0 buses assigned to it because we haven't unpaused, and likewise 0 passengers because there's no buses on it on the route yet. And of course a usage of 0%. Now the usage represents how many of your total bus seats are being occupied at any given time. So if it's at 100%, there's no free seats on your bus. If it's at 0% like it is now, no one's currently sitting on any buses. We can change the colour here. I'm going to go with a nice hot red. We can activate and deactivate the bus route. We can also change the schedule of it as well. So that is just a daytime route, a nighttime route, or round the clock. I usually leave it on all round the clock because it's just an added complexity that we don't really need to worry about. And then here we can hide the visibility. If you can see on the map here, it's disabling and enabling the actual colour of the red line on the map. Finally, we could delete the line if we really wanted to. But the main thing to point out here, which once again took me far too long to realise, we can click on line details here. And this gives us some even more information. This is a crude view of our actual route with the bus stops here as well in the white dots. Now you can actually see when you mouse over these how many passengers are waiting for the next bus here. And once the buses actually start here, we'll be able to see them travelling around the route. Now they're just shown as just red squares for the minute, but they'll actually have white dots within the red squares, and that once again represents how many people are sat on that bus. 0 dots means there's no one on it, and 6 dots means it's completely full. Next we get some more information about our routes here. So once again, the length and the stops and the passengers and the usage. Here we can adjust the ticket price. This is a very handy one. I'm going to set that to about 20 for the minute. And then we get the assigned vehicles. This is how many buses are actually doing this loop. You'll notice there's a minimum number of buses needed for this route. This actually scales depending on how long the route is. So if it was 20 kilometers long, we'd have a minimum of 6 vehicles needed for that route. At the moment, I'm just going to leave it on 2. And that's it. Now, we'll be able to come into our bus depot here, and quite shortly we'll see that some of these white buses will go red and then go about their way, start doing the route. There we go, there's 1 and 2. Now what we can do, I'm going to pause, bring back the UI. We can click on this bus, and then something I haven't pointed out yet, but you might have noticed this little pin icon here. We can click on him, and now we're tracking this bus. So I can unpause, and we can watch him go. And there we go, he's picking up people here. You see them walking into the bus. The doors don't open apparently, they just phase into it. What on earth? Still got plenty of people loading up here, and you can see what I mean about these little white dots in the bus here, showing that it's about half full. And it looks like we're getting usage of about 68%. 69.
Nice.
Very nice. So this is quite a good bus route. This is better than I'd planned. Clearly lots of people were begging for some public transport. We've just run into our first water problem here. You can see that because we've been ignoring the garbage notification for our groundwater pumping station. You see the efficiency here. He's operating at minus 50% because we've got garbage piling up. And because I'm lazy, I'm actually just going to add another upgrade so we can ignore that problem for the moment. And there we go, problem solved. And there we have it. This has turned out to be quite a successful bus route. Very used. You'll notice here, as I mentioned, I've built in some more pedestrian bridges here because we were really having some problems with pedestrian crossing. And look at that, we're over 100% usage here. So now, to compensate for the increased demand, we can up the amount of vehicles. And that will then assign another bus in here, who's going to go red. There he is. Now, something to note about spacing out your bus stops. I found that between 3 to 5 blocks distance between your bus stops works the best. Any closer, and it will obviously slow down the time it takes to use your bus route, and it will also increase congestion as well. But if you space it out any further than that, it won't actually be very useful and no one will really use it. You can see as well, this has had a great impact on our finances. We're now making a nice amount of money from public transport fees. There you go, 53k a month. That's not too bad. And there we have it, that's bus routes. And as I mentioned as well, that will actually increase the land value, which you can see here in the info view. Now you notice a lot of these green buildings are all around where the bus routes are because they're very happy because they've got easy access to the rest of the city. Now the last piece of public transport I want to cover today is trams. We haven't unlocked these yet. These, unlike the buses and the taxis, you need to actually spend a development point on, which you can do in here. First you need to unlock trains, and then you get the trams. Now what I'm going to do is save so I can show these off, but I don't actually want to place them yet because we don't really need it. But I'll place it just to show it off for the video. So now we've got the tram window unlocked here. And much like the buses and the trains, you need to actually put down a tram depot for this to work. This is essentially where your trams spawn from and where they go to do their maintenance. Now you can see here that when we put this down, let's find a good place for it. This is all just an example. This is not good practice. So we get our building in here where the trams are. This is connected with tram lines. And you can see the actual tram lines on the road here. Now, as you'd expect, we can now place these tram tracks in our city. And we can place these, much like the public transport roads, we can place these by themselves, or we can upgrade roads to include the tram tracks, like so. And you can see this little indicator here means that this is a dead end and we need to continue building the track. So let's just, for example's sake, just go along here. Much like the buses as well, we get to put down a tram stop. These are slightly more interesting because on roads like this, it will just place it on the side like so. And the tram will stop in here. People will wait here and get on the tram. Or on a 6-lane road, the tram stop will actually go in the central median. In fact, I wonder if we can exemplify this with a median road. Yeah, there we go. So I've placed a road with a median in it, the divided road. And the tram tracks will actually run through the center of the road here. If we put down a tram stop, you'll see it actually occupies the middle of the road like that. Now this can be handy for keeping the pedestrians off the sidewalk. However, it does mean they need to actually cross the road into the middle of the road. I think these look way cooler though, personally. Now, trams have a few differences to buses. They're obviously much less flexible than buses. Buses can go anywhere that there's roads. However, trams obviously need these tracks in them. But it is a lot cheaper to maintain than buses, surprisingly. The bus depot is 150k with 15k upkeep, whereas the trams, it's 100k with 5k upkeep. So actually, if you're on a tight budget, these might be the one you want. But then you do need to place down the tracks as well, which do cost upfront money and then upkeep as well. I'm just going to close off this loop here just so we can make an example. There we go, lovely. Let's put another stop in here just for example's sake. And then much like the buses, it's all about just connecting the stops. So we click that one into this one, and then he comes round, grabs that, and then comes back to the start. Pathfinding failed. Oh, okay, yeah, so trams need to have somewhere to turn around. So if I, once again, I've already saved, so this is all for example's sake. If we have maybe a little turning circle here. Lovely. Now we should be able to connect all of these bad boys up and then come back to the start. and we'll see it in action. That will now start a tram service coming out of here somewhere. Where's he going to come from? There he is. Now the upside of trams compared to buses is they have a lot more capacity. Can you see he's got 240 potential passengers here, whereas buses I believe is 80. Yeah, 80. So the best way to use these, I find, is for routes, you know, busy city corridors where buses are already at their max capacity and you need something a bit beefier. When you know that there's already demand for people to go from here to there, these guys will do it much better. You'll see he'll stop and pull in. People would get in here if this was a sensibly designed route. And off he goes. He'll do the loop and just come back round. Now the cool thing is about trams is, once again, they are very flexible. You know, you could use them on roads like buff buses here, or you could essentially turn it into a light rail network. You know, we can place these by themselves, build a little, you know, DLR or an intercity railway, and have these guys just go round and round away from the actual traffic here, which is really good if you want to actually reduce the congestion and have higher capacity. And one thing to note as well, so this is a 4-lane road, but obviously we've taken up 2 of these lanes with tram tracks, so it's essentially now a 2-lane road for cars. So if you want to counter that, what I would do is upgrade this to a 6-lane road first, then put the tram tracks in, and you'll retain your 4 lanes and have the tram tracks as well. Trams can be a bit niche, but if used right, they really do serve a purpose very well. They can hold a lot of capacity, they're nice and cheap, and they're also pretty cool as well. I do like to use them. I've got a bit of a soft spot for them, even though I've been on a tram maybe once or twice in real life. And there we go, we're back in the main timeline. Now, last thing I want to note as well is pricing and public transport hierarchy. As I mentioned before, public transport has its own set of hierarchy, with different types of public transport serving different purposes and also costing different amounts of money and handling different amounts of capacity as well. Now you can kind of make sure this happens properly by adjusting the pricing here. So as I mentioned with the taxis, obviously we don't want everyone in the city using taxis to get around just because it's the cheapest option. We want people to use the buses first, and if the bus really doesn't serve their purpose, then they can use a taxi or they can just suck it up and walk. So the way I achieved this, as I'm sure you saw, we cranked the taxi fare up to max like this, and then our bus fare is at a modest $20, which is still incredibly expensive. That means the way that the Sims think is they will prioritize both price and also time. So at the moment our bus route is the quickest way to get to work and back, and it's also cheaper than getting a taxi, therefore they'll use that. However, if we had a far-flung city over here, you know, and that we connected with a train, we'd obviously want them to use the train to get there and back before they go about using the trams or getting a taxi once again. So we'd make the trains even cheaper than this. You essentially want to use the pricing to incentivize the fastest mode of transport that they can use, and basically dissuade them from using taxis and, you know, the smaller scale transport as much as we can. And the end result is this will keep your Sims using your public transport in a sensible manner, because you can't trust these guys. They'll do weird things if you let them. But that's the smartest and easiest way to make sure that everything works properly. But for now, guys, we've covered all the early game public transport, so I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you're liking this content, you found it very useful, then please do leave a like and subscribe, because there's more of these episodes coming, and I'll see you in the next one.